Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on December 28th, 2014 at a hair before 1600 in the afternoon Eastern Time. And it's the first Sunday after Christmas, which has a liturgical significance, but today was also our rector's last day as our rector. And our Suffragan Bishop, or our retired Suffragan Bishop, was there. Interestingly, not to preach. Charles preached, but he did celebrate at the Holy Communion, and then, of course, he had a bit of a role in terms of sort of saying this man is now leaving. Things went fairly well for something like this. You have a certain. Well, I thought there'd be a far larger sort of cast of characters than there was. It was basically just sort of the standard people. The choir didn't process; they stayed up in the choir loft, for the entrance, and well, that's because they had extra people in from the Delaware Community Chorus to sing with them. So it was actually a lot simpler and less confused than usual, although, well, there's always something, isn't there? There was a certain amount of rearranging of the furniture in the chancel area. The two lay readers there's a little two-seat pew that sits over by the lectern, and normally the rector sits over on the side toward the pulpit, and oftentimes when the bishop comes, or a bishop comes, and is going to sit, rather than behind the altar in the bishop's chair where it used to be, these guys that sit back there and you couldn't see them, we'd move it, down next to the rector's chair, and but for some reason we put the rector's chair over where the lay reader's pew was, and then the bishop's chair where it would be anyway, normally, if it's not behind the altar. And so my judge friend and I were relegated to sitting behind the altar, which oftentimes we do when they have these kind of special services. From a liturgically significant point of view, in terms of him leaving and the bishop, this sort of separation, it had some degree of visual significance. So I did the Galatians reading today, and my judge friend did the Isaiah reading, and there were some really good tunes. Although there were a couple of these kumbaya type things, but they weren't particularly egregious. So I certainly was willing to let that slide. My judge friend was kind of especially annoyed about one of them. I can't remember which one. But they have this little ceremony where when a rector starts his ministry at a parish, people of the congregation give him certain things and to represent things. For example, since we're St. Peter's, we have this big iron key. I mean, it's like like this, you know. And he joked when he first came, I'd like to see the door this thing opens. Well, he said today, interestingly, he remarked today, he says, well, I discovered the door that this key opens is to the wider community, which I thought was a very reasonable statement to make, you know, if you're developing a metaphor. And then, you know, there were some people from the Elder Guild that got like a couple of the communion cups, you know. I mean, they didn't get them personally, but it was just. And he handed me the gospel book, and he said, he chose me to do it. He says because I have such an intense belief in the preaching of the word. I guess he finally got me. He finally figured me out. Well, it's very humbling. I mean, that was very humbling to be included in that situation. So basically, it all went well. The bishop was not looking good. Now, as I said, he's a very large man, and he's one of the few people I've met that's actually shorter than me. I do have a bit of a short man syndrome, but not like some guys do. The bishop does not have a short man syndrome, by the way. He was not looking. He was very pale, and he got into this kind of extended low grade. Roseanne got up and went out and got him a glass of water. I afterwards sort of thought I should have anticipated that, but you know, I mean, people get these little. I just thought started out like a frog, you know, quote frog in his throat. In retrospect, I got thinking about this man's physical situation, and it didn't quite sound like an early, I'm getting ready to go into heart failure cough. And it didn't sound like he had, you know, belched up something from breakfast and kind of aspirated it. It didn't sound good, I'll tell you that, given the way it went on. But it finally kind of settled down a bit after the water. The water didn't seem to help it, but it didn't seem to make it worse. In other words, the guy didn't aspirate the water. I thought to myself, you know, I hope this guy doesn't aspirate this water and get really coughing. Or worse, you know, go into laryngospasm, we're going to try to have to resuscitate this dude. Because that would be a bit of a challenge. Yeah, but you look around the congregation and you've got, let's see, me, Judy, Will. Well, that's 3 physicians right there. You got about 6 nurses, you know, maybe even more than that in the congregation. So, I mean, there'd be plenty of help. Now, admittedly, Judy's actually even bigger than the bishop, and has a hard time moving around anymore, and is very short of breath just in the best of times. So, but Will and I could have probably dealt with it. Well, and Roseanne, she's a nurse, or was a nurse. Well, still is a nurse. I don't know if she keeps her license up or not. Well, in any case, we would have swung into action. But we didn't have to, because Bishop was able to swallow his water just fine. Didn't seem to help the coughing any, though. I think I just stopped on its own. So that's it. I helped with the passing out of the wine. We didn't run out of wine. Oh. We were, unfortunately, instead of using the very wide-mouthed chalices, we were using these little narrow ceramic goblets. Now, they're wider in diameter than a champagne flute, but not too daggone much, and about as long. Uh, most parishioners don't like, particularly the parishioners in Tink that sort of dip the bread into the wine. Well, that's fine if, one, the bread doesn't fall apart when it touches the liquid surface, touches the wine. Or, which happened twice today. This is a first. I've been doing this now for almost 10 years. And this is a first. Several times I've had somebody drop a piece of bread in the chalices / goblets. And that's generally not an issue. Or, a significant chunk of it breaks off. That's generally not an issue. But this one woman today, she dropped the whole thing in. And I said, well, do you want to fish it out, or do you want to just forget about it? And she thought about it, actually. Actually, there was about a 3-second thinking about it. And so she plunged both 2 fingers in and sort of fished this thing out. And we have this sort of linen cloth. I call it a rag, but it's a very nice linen cloth. They call, the Alder Code calls it a purificator. Well, I'll tell you, when you're done using this after a communion pass, there ain't anything pure about this, I'll tell you. You wipe off the rim of the game. This is not something you'd want to use in your kitchen. Obviously, they wash them between uses. So, shortly thereafter, a guy dropped his chunk of bread in there. And he just sort of shrugged and turned and walked off. Well, communion went on, and then Roseanne brings me down, and we had one of these many years ago, but it disappeared. Well, we all have theories about what happened, but let's suffice to say it disappeared. It was one of these it looks like a little tiny silver gravy bowl, and there's a spoon in it, and the idea is you take the spoon, and you dip the bread out of the wine, and you put, to sort of keep the wine tidy so it doesn't look like you're offering somebody a slurry of bread and wine. Well, my understanding is in the Orthodox churches, sometimes that's the standard practice. I've also heard that in some Roman Catholic churches, the priest will at least deliberately put at least one piece in. But I've been told that. Now, I don't know I obviously don't know that firsthand. And I don't know the Orthodox practice firsthand, except a friend of mine who goes to, who's a Serbian Orthodox, says that's correct. And I've read it too in things about the Orthodox Church. So it's neither here nor there to me if there's bread in the wine. But they finally found apparently there had been a spare somewhere stashed, in some altar guild hidey hole for years and years and years that they just sort of forgotten about. And somewhere along the line, somebody found it and stuck it out there on the side table. I'm sure there's a name for it. I just call it the side table. And so we were able to fish that out. Well, I'm glad to know that that's around because, this is not an uncommon problem when you're helping with the wine. Listen, I take this stuff very seriously. I really do. I mean, you've called down the Holy Ghost to move upon this bread and this wine, and it's been sanctified. But I think, we are human beings after all, made in the image of God, and these things happen sometimes. Some of the people just feel absolutely humiliated, which they shouldn't. They shouldn't feel humiliated. That's no. Mm-mm. Not at all. That's just. See, we use real bread. We don't use these pieces of cardboard, called wafers. No, we use real bread. And different people bake the bread, and basically, bread is kind of a living thing. It's going to be very different from batch to batch to batch to batch. Some bread is more crumbly than others. This wasn't a particularly crumbly piece. I think this was just something, because the mouth of that goblet is so narrow, people didn't think they could get a good purchase on the thing while they stuck their hand down it. And I always tried to tilt the thing down so the liquid layer is very close to the lower rim as presented to the communicant. But some of these women come up there with these big bulgy rings on their hands, and they get snagged on that upper lip of the goblet, and that wasn't the case for this woman that dropped it. She just dropped it. She had very rheumatoid arthritic fingers. They looked like little tiny stubbins, and I think that was why that happened. Well, high adventure at the altar rail, I guess, huh? Communion rail. And service went well. And then we had a sort of a little eat spread downstairs. Oh, I'm sorry, in the undercroft. First time I came up there, I called it the basement. Boy, did I get a little ration of grief about that. That's the undercroft. Okay. At least I didn't call it the cellar. Well, everybody, there's there are terms for everything, aren't there? Lord knows in medicine there are. So I actually went down. My judge friend said, you're going to go downstairs. I said, yeah. I said, I think I really have to put an appearance at this. And of course, they had basically two of my favorite things. Everybody kept telling me to eat the cake, eat the cake, eat the cake. It's really good. It's really good. It's really good. Look, look, folks. I don't do that. I don't do that anymore. First of all, I don't want to anymore, just because I've lost the taste for that sweet stuff. But what I've not lost the taste for: salami, ham, cheese, crackers, shrimp, broccoli, cauliflower, and dip, and cocktail sauce. Well, I did not overindulge, but I'll tell you, if I had stayed there much longer, the old willpower would have crumbled. And I would have pigged out. But I didn't. So then I came home, and everything was okay. And by the grace of God, here we are talking about it right now. So on that note, I'm going to say bye-bye, YouTube.